Well, it's a minute after noon, and I think we're going to get this show on the road. Welcome, everyone. I'm Lance J. Brown, co-founder of the CSU. It's my pleasure to welcome you to today's event, the 41st in our long-standing series of discussions with community leaders from around the world and on our progress towards greater, greener cities for us all. I'm speaking from New York City with our guest, Tom Hoban, who is in Florida. It's my pleasure to introduce Tom and moderate today's program. For those attending who want AIA continuing education credits, you receive one HSW if you stay for 45 minutes. Please use the learning objectives included in the invitation and the AIA self-reporting option to receive your credits. For those joining us for the first time, the organizer of the series, the CSU, is devoted to building bridges between the United Nations and civil society, the design professions, business, academia, and allied organizations. Our mission ranges from increasing awareness about emerging issues, facilitating knowledge transfer between and among policy and decision makers, and fostering connections, cooperation, and collaboration, while all the time promoting the United Nations 17 Sustainable Development Goals, and especially Goal 11 about cities and communities. We do this in the spirit of collaboration with the UN Habitat Office, the AIA New York chapter, the UN Habitat Professionals Forum, the NGA Committee on Sustainable Development in New York, the Columbia University's CBIPS, and CEL, the Creative Exchange Lounge.
11th and 12th of May.
I hear someone's voice in the background. If we could all
May
mute.
11th, Sunday.
I want to invite everyone to visit our CSU website, see our resources, see our publications, and join us for upcoming 2025 events, especially our annual flagship event at the UN and our annual gala, which will be this year in October. Next week, on the 16th, you can join us for a CSU event entitled Youth-Centered Cities, Designing Sustainable and Healthy Urban Futures. And on April 22nd, we'll have an Earth Day event. The details and registration for information on these are posted in the chat. Please also see our website for other CSU events. Today's Green Cities speaker, Tom Hoban, is the President and Chief Investment Officer and partner of Kitson & Partners. He has years of experience in real estate and strong background in capital markets. He oversees Kitson & Partners' strategic growth, managing the 1.5 million retail portfolio, 800,000 square foot development pipeline, as well as leading the company's finance division and marketing strategy team. Tom graduated cum laude from the University of Notre Dame. He serves on the advisory board of Notre Dame's Fitzgerald Institute for Real Estate, also on the Economic Council of Palm Beach County, volunteers with Top Soccer, and he's an active member of the ULI, the Urban Land Institute, and the International Council of Shopping Centers. The CSU, as said, has had over 40 green cities programs, hearing about cities all around the world. We have yet to address the advent of a new city. Today, with Tom's unique experience and perspectives, we're going to hear about a new town underway in Southwest Florida. One of the primary purposes of the Green City series is to highlight best practices and share them for all to digest. And Tom will share the lessons learned and the future lessons hope to be learned from his experience working on a ground-up, innovative, and unique new town, and how to create strategies and practices for improving the built environment. I believe that this presentation will connect some dots previously unseen, including very big issues on energy and resilience. I don't want to jump the gun, but there are some extraordinary aspects to Babcock Ranch. On a very more personal note, I first became aware of Babcock Ranch when it was just an idea. Just over 20 years ago, I was invited to a project presentation by founder Sid Kitson at Columbia University, invited by Jeffrey Sachs for a think tank session. Sid's presentation was audacious and exciting, He was explaining plans for a new town of 50,000 people that would be energy self-sufficient, highly sustainable, landscape conservative, equipped with almost sci-fi mobility systems, and innovative in many other ways. The students, PhD candidates, leveled some really tough questions, and Sid parried them with elan and a very positive spirit. Now, I was impressed, and over the following years, I checked periodically to see if the project had legs. Occasionally, I came across some information, and then one day I saw a front page article in the New York Times about students being taken to and from school in an autonomous school bus in Babcock Ranch. And this, along with other information, convinced me that the plans were meeting the goals and objectives and were worthy of sharing. Now, at the risk of going off on a tangent, I must say that utopian and innovative new towns are not a new idea, from Italy's Palmanova or the French Saltworks or the British new towns of Runcorn and Hook and Cumbernauld in Scotland, to the American experiences of Savannah and Pullman and garden cities like Radburn, Celebration, and the brash experiments of Masdar in Abu Dhabi. We have seen a continuing search for how to live going forward. Many of the examples mentioned had primary focuses: pre-industrial defense, industry, workers' housing, compact density, and so on. And Babcock Ranch has its own set of goals and objectives. And I look forward today to hearing more about them and learning more about them today. I know there'll be questions. I'm sure there'll be questions for Tom. Please use the chat function to submit your questions, and we'll do our best to get them all answered. I have to say, I'm very excited about this. I'm very thankful to Tom and his team for joining us this afternoon, and I look forward to a wonderful, wonderful presentation and discussion. Tom, over to you. Screen is yours.
Lance, thank you for the kind words and for the introduction, and to the CSU for including me here today. It's an honor to be here. You used the words audacious and exciting for what you heard 20 years ago. Those are two of the kinder adjectives that I've heard. So thank you for your kindness in your description. I was actually at the same event that Lance referenced 20 years ago at Columbia with the Earth Institute. And when Lance and I were chatting before today's event, he started by saying, it takes me back to something I attended 20 years ago. And I was thinking to myself, gosh, that's a long time ago. But there I was at the event with Lance. So nice to be here. Nice to see everybody. I'm going to try and work through a presentation here over the next 25 minutes or so, and then leave some time for Q&A discussion afterwards. So let me try to, I'm not a tech whiz, so let me just try to pull this up and make sure everybody can see what's on my screen. We got a thumbs up. We good? Everybody can see the slides?
Yep, you're all good.
All good.
Okay, great.
They look great.
Great. Okay, thank you. So I'll zip in here. So Kitson and Partners, we are a Florida-based real estate developer. We've been around for over 30 years. Our roots were in the Northeast, up in the New Jersey markets, suburbs of Manhattan. Made our way to Florida in the mid-90s with a project called Ibis Golf and Country Club here in West Palm Beach. It was a deal that had gone south during the savings and loan crisis in the late 80s, and we picked it up in the mid-90s, and we never looked back. We ended up really moving our company to Florida and have been exclusively focused on Florida since about 2002, 2003. I've got a great team of people here at Kitson. We've also surrounded ourselves with a great advisory board, and we could talk about this a bit later. But when we're doing things like Babcock Ranch, which I'll get into, being surrounded by people that have a diverse set of skills and diverse experiences goes a long way towards helping us get to success. So the gentlemen you see on the screen here below Sid and I have had a huge influence on our decision-making, our strategies, and our execution over the last 15 plus years that we've had the board in tow. Switching to Babcock Ranch, what you're looking at here is a map of Southwest Florida. The map in the lower corner of the main picture is the icon there. You'll see the Babcock Ranch logo. That's geographically where we sit in Southwest Florida. The bigger map's a bit of a zoom in. And what you're looking at there in the green and red, that is the original Babcock Ranch. That's 91,000 acres. And what you see in green is 73,000 acres of the 91 that we sold to the state of Florida in the state's largest transaction in its history. We sold those 73,000 acres for $350 million as part of the deal. We kept what we see there in red, which is 18,000 acres of land, which is now Babcock Ranch. So 80% of it was sold into permanent preservation to the state, and 20% of it was left for us as a developer to build a new town with entitlements for about 20,000 homes and 6 million square feet of commercial space. What you'll see here, if you notice on the map, you'll see, can you guys see my cursor? If I move it around, can you guys see this with a head nod? You guys see my cursor on the screen or no? The Punta Gorda Airport here north is about 30 minutes from Babcock Ranch. The more well-known Southwest Florida International Airport here to the south is also about 25 to 30 minutes from Babcock. Downtown Fort Myers, about 30 minutes. Bonita Springs, about 40 minutes. So just to give you a sense as to where we are geographically in the state. If you look over here, this is the Charlotte Harbor Basin west of Babcock. It's about 20 miles inland from the water. It's also about 20 to 30 feet above sea level, which for those in Florida who will appreciate, South Florida is essentially at sea level. So we're a virtual mountain here in South Florida at 20 to 30 feet above sea level. So geographically, we are actually a little bit ahead of the game from a resilient perspective with our location here inland and somewhat upland. If I keep moving, why did the state want to buy 72,000 acres from Babcock Ranch? If you look at the map on the left, what you'll see there in that red rectangle on the right and that dark blob, that is Lake Okeechobee. And what you see on the far left side of that rectangle is the Charlotte Harbor Basin. And that gold star in the middle there is Babcock Ranch. The state had controlled land from Lake Okeechobee to the Charlotte Harbor Basin for a natural wildlife corridor. And the missing piece for that puzzle was Babcock Ranch. So the state was very focused on how they could make that full connection from Lake Okeechobee to the Charlotte Harbor Basin, and Babcock was kind of somewhat standing in the way of them doing that. So we knew the state had a keen interest in Babcock Ranch under Jeb Bush's leadership as governor. He was focused on creating natural wildlife corridors throughout the state. We engaged with the state, worked through a transaction, sold them the 73,000 acres simultaneously with our closing of the 91,000 acres with the Babcock family. This is a bit of a zoom in on the master plan. This is the 18,000 acre footprint. What you see on the left side of that plan in purple is call it phase 1. That's where we started. We have since moved east into phase 2, which is in yellow. And the final phase of Babcock Ranch is on the far east side that shows up there in pink, which we'll get to sometime down the road. If you look too on the north side of Babcock Ranch, far north, you'll see a bunch of areas highlighted in yellow. That is our solar array. That's just under 900 acres of land, just under 700,000 panels that generates 150 megawatts of solar energy that powers the town of Babcock Ranch. In the region, we straddle 2 counties. You'll see Charlotte County on the north side and Lee County on the south, and our property right there in the middle. We're about 80% of our property is in Charlotte County and 20% is in Lee County. So we get the joy of working with 2 different local municipalities and jurisdictions as it relates to permits and approvals. But we're in a great location. Southwest Florida's got a lot of growth, both historically and projected into the future. And we're prepared to catch a lot of that growth with a really interesting, new, innovative new town in Babcock Ranch. 18,000 acres can be a bit of a head scratcher, so I'm trying to bring it into perspective. I know we get a lot of folks on the call, probably from the New York area. This is the island of Manhattan in New York, which most people are familiar with at some level. It's 23 square miles. This is Babcock Ranch overlaid on top of Manhattan. So Babcock Ranch is 28 square miles. It is a big piece of land. It's a large project, which requires a lot of strategic thinking, a lot of planning, a lot of design, and a lot of capital. It's a very long-term intensive project. So that's the footprint we're dealing with at Babcock. We closed back in July of 2006. We contracted in July of 2005, and between contract and closing, we had come up with this as a series of pillars to guide us on the strategy for execution for Babcock, thinking through what makes a place great, what makes certain towns great and thrive and grow versus other towns that seem to go by the wayside and not experience robust growth. And we came up with these pillars of initiatives to focus our development strategy on. One being the environment. Started off by saying we sold 73,000 acres to the state of Florida. We are surrounded by nature. We are living in nature. And so embracing that and making that an amenity and leaning into that as opposed to going at combat with it was a big part of our strategy. Even engaging with the environmental community, with the Audubon Society, the Florida Fish and Wildlife, the WWF, and even the Sierra Club to hold hands with that environmental community, make Babcock Ranch a very environmentally sensitive community was a big part of our strategy. Two, health and wellness, certainly having access to great health care, but also having a community that focuses on outdoor activity, outdoor lifestyle, hiking trails, biking trails, nutrition, farm to table, et cetera. Really big part of the pillars of Babcock Ranch. Education. We have a K-12 public charter school system at Babcock Ranch with over 1,000 students in that school system today. And we're working hard right now on higher education with one of the local universities in Southwest Florida as well. We believe education is a big differentiator for Babcock Ranch. Lance alluded to it in the introduction, energy. We are in the Sunshine State, and when you're building a town that'll be home to 50,000 to 60,000 people, in today's world, you're thinking about things like resources, natural resources, energy. How do we maintain access to affordable, clean energy? Put us on a path, which I'll talk about in the presentation with Florida Power and Light, to explore what the options could be to bring solar to Babcock Ranch. Certainly technology is a big thread for all of us in our lives. We've got fiber to every home and every business at Babcock Ranch, and building on that with artificial intelligence, innovation, et cetera, a big part of what makes a place great and continues to make it thrive into the future. Transportation, really focusing on multimodal transportation. What can we be doing as developers, planners, designers to make alternative modes of transportation convenient and accessible, to perhaps get people to avoid being two-car families to be one-car families, and over time perhaps being a no-car family if there's enough access to convenient transportation other than a gas powered vehicle. We are in South Florida. A big part of this discussion about resilience, storm safety, certainly a big hallmark for us. We'll talk about that in depth here in the presentation. And then finally, just fun recreational activities, creating great memories and great opportunities for the folks at Babcock Ranch to recreate and enjoy their lifestyles at Babcock. Those are the pillars that drove us as we got into the planning and design and the launch of Babcock Ranch. And this is the same exact chart you would have seen if you met us back in 2005 and 6, as you're seeing here today. So we're very proud of this vision that we've had for the last 20 or so years. What do we do first? We first went back and looked at the original maps and aerials of Babcock Ranch from the 1940s. We thought two things. One, it would give us a really good sense as to where the sensitive lands were. Where were the wetlands? Where were the areas we should be very sensitive to and stay out of as a developer and preserve versus get into and start doing horizontal development? Number two, were the natural flowways on the property. How did water ingress and egress this property, and how could we not only maintain that and avoid disrupting it, but how could we enhance it as a developer and make it even more of an opportunity for water management within the community? And so this is a map that we use. We plugged in again with the environmental community. We sat down at the table. We drew lines on a page to determine what would be developed versus what would stay into permanent preservation, even within the 18,000 acres. And the result of that was roughly half of our 18,000 acres is permanently preserved in preservation for green space. So 9,000 acres of our 18,000 acres are greenways, flowways, and wetlands, and 9,000 acres are being actively developed. Thought it might help to show a video we took and produced back in 2005 and 6, just to give the group a sense as to what the land looked like when we actually acquired Babcock Ranch back in July of 2006. So it's only a minute, but it should give you a little bit of a taste for what Babcock Ranch looked like when we purchased it in 06. Okay, so hopefully it gives you a bit of a sense as to what the land looks like. It's a very pristine part of the state. It's a throwback to old world Florida. We did have 5,000 head of cattle when we purchased back in '06. We've got under 1,000 heads today, but we do have cowboys on staff. We have a cattle operation. That's part of what we do at Babcock Ranch. If we zoom into resilience, this slide really helps try to encapsulate, what we've done to try to make Babcock Ranch a resilient town. And when you think about resilience, when you think about storms and you think about the hurricane season in Florida, there's a couple things that people tend to think about. One is during the storm, and two is after the storm. And during the storms, certainly people want to be safe and be able to shelter in their homes if possible. How do we shelter in place? And is my home safe? In my roof, my windows, my doors, all those openings, am I secure in my home from a wind perspective? Secondly, it's a flood perspective, right? Am I in the storm surge? Am I in a floodplain? How can I keep my home from flooding? Those are the two primary, if you paint with a broad brush, concerns and risks that homeowners and businesses tend to focus on within their homes and in their offices during the storm. After the storm, it's more about the inconveniences and risks of post-storm activity. Power going out, power lines down, roads being blocked, et cetera. And so from a developer's perspective, how can we put some principles in place, best practices in place, design elements into our community to help mitigate those concerns and those risks? And what you're seeing here on this slide kind of summarizes a bit of that. I talked earlier about our location, our footprint being 20 miles or so inland and 30 feet above sea level gives us a great head start as a place that is unlikely to flood and unlikely to be in a storm surge. The property flows north to south. As I said earlier, we decided to preserve about 50% of our land as permanent green space, waterways, flowways, greenways, et cetera, which greatly assists with water storage and drainage. We own and operate the water utility and the irrigation system at Babcock Ranch, and the irrigation is reclaimed water. We adopt the Florida Green Building Standards for our buildings. The building codes in South Florida are pretty stringent due to the hurricanes that we do encounter on an annual basis. The Florida Green Belt Coalition is actually a step above that, and we require our home builders to maintain a minimum of bronze certification within the Florida Green Belt Coalition. We have a continuous monitoring and adaptive control stormwater management system. It's a mouthful. So it's a smart water management system. It connects to the NOAA. So we connect to NOAA. We have the ability to do predictive analytics on rainfall, and all of our lakes are interconnected. So we can fluctuate our lake levels. And when storms are coming in, we can actually, through our permits, lower our lake levels to further mitigate the risk of flood, which is a huge benefit to the town. From a land planning perspective, we are very focused on native plant materials and flood tolerant vegetation throughout the community. As I said earlier, we study the maps on the flowways, natural flowways of the property. We know Mother Nature is batting 1,000. It's difficult to beat Mother Nature. So rather than try to combat it and fight it, we've decided to accept it, embrace it, and work around it, which I think also pays dividends long-term for damage and for flood control, water control. We have a series of rain gardens adjacent to our roadways that are great collectors and reservoirs for water storage, also create some nice habitat and species when you plant them properly with native materials and also with littorals. And as I said earlier, over 50% of our land is set aside for preservation. So from that perspective, we're doing a really above and beyond job of mitigating some of those risks. And finally, with Florida Power and Light, back in 2009, we agreed to a deal with Florida Power and Light to come in and bring solar to Babcock Ranch. Originally, it was to bring in 75 megawatts of solar on 440 acres. The way that they're a regulated utility and the way the regulated utilities work, they are not allowed to bring on new power sources unless they're at the least cost option. And for a long time, that was natural gas. So while we agreed to a deal with them in 2009, it wasn't until 2015 where the cost of solar actually was at par with the cost of natural gas, which led to them breaking ground on a 440-acre, 75-megawatt solar photovoltaic plant at Babcock Ranch. The success of that first phase led to them doing a second phase, another 440 acres, of land and another 75 megawatts, which gets us to 150 megawatts total. That is enough power to power the entire town of Babcock Ranch at full build out. They also built a 10 megawatt, 40 megawatt hour solar to battery storage facility. That allows us roughly 4 hours of redistribution when the sun is not out at night and or cloudy days. We can store for up to 4 hours and redistribute through that facility. All very positive and unique at the time. That's become more commonplace throughout the state as solar has become more affordable, and Florida Power and Light had come on a mission to put in 30 million panels by 2030, back 15 years ago, and they're well on their way to that goal. We've also got all of our infrastructure with Florida Power and Light has been hardened, meaning all the transmission lines are built on concrete or steel, and our substations are elevated to avoid flooding. And we have multiple feeders that run through our substations underground. All of it's underground. We have a lot of redundancy, and it really kind of try to package protect ourselves from losing power at Babcock Ranch. Some visuals to accompany some of the commentary I just made. Here you can see some of our natural flowways that I mentioned earlier throughout the property that we've decided to embrace and maintain. You'll see here some natural wetlands. Again, these serve as incredible reservoirs of storage for water when we do have these hurricanes that blow through, not just the water storage, but ultimately the drainage of the water. I talked earlier about not just maintaining, but investing in. And this is an example. You can see a before and after picture here of an area of Babcock Ranch. The Babcock family was in the agricultural business and the farming business. They impacted some of the land through those businesses. We've invested in restoring those habitats through a series of weir systems. So you can see some of the posts here on the before picture coming out of the ground versus the posts here behind the weir system that we've built and invested in throughout the community to recreate that habitat and rebuild that habitat. Here's some pictures of some rain gardens at Babcock Ranch. Again, these lie mostly adjacent to our roadway system. Ends up being more storage for those heavy rain seasons we get. Ended up actually being pretty beautiful amenities throughout the community as well. I talked earlier about nature and about the environment being an amenity. We've got over 100 miles of biking trails and hiking trails that meander and weave their way through our wetlands and through our environmentally sensitive areas, which become great amenities and outdoor activation for our homeowners. We have huge lakes. That's part of that smart management system, water management system I referenced earlier. The Lake Babcock, for example, is over 300 acres. So the ability to move water and transport water through our entire lake system to manage the water management on flooding season is a huge benefit to the neighborhood and the community. Picture here of our utility. What you're looking at towards the bottom of this picture is actually the Florida Power and Light solar substation. That's where the transmission comes in from the solar field into Babcock Ranch. Everything from that substation goes underground and into the community. Everything's buried. What you see at the top of the picture is our water utility. That's the Town and Country Water Utility, water, wastewater, and irrigation plant. Picture of our solar field, solar farm. That's most of the we see on the left-hand side of that picture is the phase 1 part of the 440 acre, 175 megawatts. What you see beyond that tree line to the right in that picture is the beginning of phase 2, which extends east and south outside the picture. The picture on the right is our solar to battery storage facility. Those are all batteries you see encased within that structure there that help give us that 4 hours of redistribution time on the power. So these are all the things we've done to help prepare ourselves for the inevitable in South Florida, which is storm season. And the question is, how is this all going to hold up? How are we going to do when we're faced with these tests that show up every year during hurricane season? And what you're looking at here is the path of the 3 most recent hurricanes that have come through Southwest Florida. The main one here on the left is Hurricane Ian. You'll see some gold stars on these maps that signify where Babcock Ranch is located within that path. On the right, at the top is Helene. At the bottom is Milton. All 3 of which impacted Babcock, but none of which impacted Babcock more so than Hurricane Ian. And as most of you are probably aware, Hurricane Ian it made landfall right at Fort Myers Beach, Sanibel Island, and Captiva. An incredibly catastrophic storm that ravaged Southwest Florida. Its path took it right over Babcock Ranch, sat on top of Babcock for about 8 hours with 100-mile-an-hour sustained winds and gusts of up to 150 miles an hour for 8 hours. And so we were put to the test significantly with Hurricane Ian. And in those moments, you kind of hold your breath and you hope that all the engineering and design and planning that had been done was going to work. And I'm going to give you a little bit of a glimpse of what that looked like, not at its peak, but as it was getting going. Sid Kitson was actually at Babcock Ranch. I've got some footage here to share with the group. It's only about a minute, but it'll give you a sense as to what was going on at Babcock as the storm was starting to come and hit land. That is a lake, not an ocean. Those are white caps. Again, this was not the peak of the storm, but kind of as the storm was coming into land, this was still safe enough to get outside and get some footage.
Like this for hours.
So not a test that you necessarily want to take, but one you're trying to prepare for. And I guess the question, during the test is how do we do? How did we fare in the storm? And amidst a complete tragic outcome throughout Southwest Florida region, and while our hearts broke for all of our neighbors and friends and family that live in Southwest Florida, Babcock Ranch emerged from that test in flying colors. We never lost power. We never lost Wi-Fi. We didn't flood. We didn't have to go on a boil water notice with our utility. We ended up housing thousands of people from Southwest Florida, the region, in our newly opened field house, which I'll show you in a bit, which doubles as a regional evacuation shelter in times of storm. It was a huge success from the standpoint of a planning, designing, and engineering perspective. Everything we had planned for actually worked, and the news caught fire on this silver lining in Southwest Florida amidst an otherwise tragic moment. Got picked up by NPR, by CNN, New York Times, Forbes, and 60 Minutes was in town to cover the story for the broader sense of what happened in Southwest Florida, but kept hearing about Babcock Ranch, this place that stood tall during the storm, and wanted to learn more. Ended up coming over to visit with us at Babcock. Ended up on 60 Minutes the following week to kind of really tell our story and tell the world how we did it and what was different about Babcock. So it was a very validating moment for us amidst what was otherwise a tragic time for our state and for our region, but very proud of all the extra effort and work and thought and planning that went into Babcock Ranch leading to that moment. And I guess with that in mind, we're a company that's steeped in embracing innovation and thinking ahead, and we hosted an innovation workshop at Babcock Ranch back in 2019. We had very few homes at Babcock at that point, and had fortunate to have a lot of great builders at Babcock. Then in that innovation workshop, really pushing our builders to think about how to build differently, how to build homes with more sustainability in mind, more resilience in mind, adopting different building products, materials, and systems to help push the envelope on innovation. And the result of the 2019 innovation workshop led to Innovation Way, which was a series of homes that you can see there on the left, built by Lennar, Pulte, and D.R. Horton to showcase some of those technologies and some of those innovations. What you're looking at on the right, on that system, you see that darker system up against the wall there on the right. That's called a grader system, which is a system in the home that's a gray water system to take your shower and your sink water usage and recycle that into your toilet in the bathroom to help reduce water consumption. What you see on the wall there, encased in white, is a tankless water heater. And what you see on the left in that picture, as you work your way across next to the gentleman in the purple shirt, you'll see a charging station for a car. What you would continue to see on that wall, if we had more of a broader picture there, would be some battery storage on that wall that could take some power out of that battery in the car and repower that, take that energy, put it back into the home to potentially repower the home in times of storm in case power gets lost. So things like that we pushed for on Innovation Way, which we're very proud of as well, led us to 2023 hosting a second innovation workshop. This one was more on the built environment, and Babcock had grown quite a bit from 2019 through 2023. This event had, we had sold over 3,000 homes, and we had 14 builders building at Babcock. We had 46 different companies and 75 people show up for this one, which is really exciting. And this has led to many great things. that we're pursuing and thinking about pursuing at Babcock Ranch, one of which is Innovation Neighborhood. So while Babcock did Innovation Way with 9 homes, we're currently working on what would be roughly a 50-home community with our builders and with innovators, and some of the folks you're seeing here, 3D printing companies, panelization companies, robotics companies, to showcase the future of home building and the future of living here in Babcock Ranch, which we're very excited about. There's a video here that you can see. This is some homes that D.R. Horton recently built with a product called Bamcor. Bamcor is a wood substitute. It's a bamboo product manufactured in a facility. It's got a much lower carbon footprint. It's got great resilience components. It saves time. It saves labor. This is just some footage that was taken recently here in the last few months at Babcock Ranch with several homes they built with a Bamcor product, a more storm resilient, more sustainable product material at Babcock Ranch. And then finally, talking about it here for the last 25 minutes or so, here's a video of Babcock Ranch for you to see what it looks like today. And just some things to note, I'll narrate as we go. You can see some native plant materials along the roads. You'll see the large lake systems there. You'll see some rain gardens there on the right, and some wetlands that run throughout the community. This is our Founders Square. This is 65,000 square feet of mixed use town, instant town here on the lakefront. This is looking back into Founders Square from the lake. There's a great gathering space. Every Friday night, there's a Friday night food trucks here with live music. We get thousands of people every Friday night to show up here and enjoy that amenity, outdoor activity, outdoor lifestyle. Pickleball is a must in Florida. This is our K-12 school campus. You've got the high school on the right. You've got the K-8 on the left. You've got the field house there in the middle on the north side of this video, which we'll show you in a bit. As you get behind the school, this is our sports complex for the students and for the athletes. Baseball, softball, outdoor football, lacrosse, soccer, etc. This is our 40,000 square foot field house. It doubles as a storm shelter in times of need. It's a Category 5 building. Really proud of that as well. We housed 2,000 people there during Hurricane Milton from the region. More of aerial footage of the wetlands that permeate throughout Babcock Ranch, the flowways, the trail system that integrates throughout there as well. We've got a 3-mile stretch here of park system that we call the Parkway. Has 6 different parks activated by the residents. That's a dog park right here. We've got a fishing lagoon. We've got more of a passive park for adults. You'll see here a series of roundabouts. We're managing traffic with roundabouts as opposed to traffic signals. Much better for traffic calming. Various product types you'll see here, from everything from apartments to townhomes, villas, single-family homes, estate homes, waterfront homes, etc. So a very strong segmentation of products. You'll see front porches. You'll see front porch living here in Lake Timber. And you'll see our golf course community called Babcock National that's been done with Lennar. Second one's under development now. These are the apartments, 4-story, 373 apartments on the lake here with canopy. This is our first Publix anchored shopping center called Crescent Bee Commons across the street here. 120,000 square feet opening up this year. Here, fire, police, and self-storage. This is a 200,000 square foot mixed use extension of Founders Square called B Street. And that's our innovation tower. That's a hallmark and a beacon for Babcock Ranch. And so all this being done, the big question for us as developers is, how does the community and how does the region respond to all the things that we've done? And happy to report, as of last year, we got ranked in the top 10 in the United States in terms of master plan communities, which is a great accomplishment for us, given we didn't sell our first home until 2018. So in a fairly short period of time, we've made our way into the top 10. What we're doing seems to be resonating with the marketplace. Homeowners are excited. There's a great opportunity for living off the coast, inland, in a really thoughtfully designed community with a lot of amenities, outdoor lifestyle, all the things I talked about earlier, and certainly storm resilience being one of them. So with that, I will stop the presentation and kick it back to Lance to see if we want to have a chat and some Q&A.
That's great, Tom. If we can, let's see, how do I get back to speaker view? Okay, speaker view. So, Tom, thank you so much for that, omnibus wraparound discussion. pre-planning history, regional scale aspects of what this experience has been about, and down to, I think, the discrete innovations and experiments and innovations you're taking. I've not been aware that there was a bamboo project underway. I know that we're involved with 3D printing. I know that there are discussions about the economies with all of these, the advantages, the increased resilience and material concerns. And I find it, as I thought I would, all very fascinating.
Great.
I do have a couple of questions. I'm inviting others to add comments to the chat. But to kick that off, what I initially thought and hoped to see, hear some conversation about, was the demographics and community building.
Yep.
And what I'd call the urbanization of Babcock Ranch and where it intends to go. I don't know where it was. I was looking at a project not long ago that started not dissimilarly to Babcock Ranch, but eventually on the landscape, there were some multi-story buildings with higher density, reinforcing the town centers and increasing the walkability.
Yep.
And I guess I would ask what the attitude that you and your partners have towards that more compact attitude towards town planning is,
Yep.
and whether or not, if it will, become part of the future growth of Babcock.
Great questions. So I'll step back to your first question about demographics and whatnot. So I think we spent a lot of time on that, as you can imagine. Pardon me, as you can imagine, back in the planning stages, understanding who's your customer, who's buying at Babcock. And if you looked at the high level, high altitude demos for Southwest Florida, it heavily tilts towards retirees, more so than young families. And they're there, but it's a harder get than the retirees. So there was a lot of folks pushing us towards being, kind of the Villages South. And I know, Lance, you're familiar with the Villages, but the Villages being a huge retirement community up in the Orlando marketplace. And our vision was different. Our vision was really focused on multi-generational. And so how do we get multi-generational consumers and home buyers to pay attention to us? And this gets back to a topic Lance and I chatted about before we got together here today, placemaking and creating places. And we're firm believers that's a big differentiator, a big driver for growth and for success. And it's incredible what design can do and planning can do to help influence behavior. And so things like, wider bike lanes and wider sidewalks that promote outdoor lifestyle, outdoor walking and outdoor living. A school, right? Having a school in your first phase sends a message to the marketplace. This is not a retirement community. This is a community for families and for everybody, lifelong learning. And so we really leaned into the demographics quite a bit, Lance, and we got pretty creative with respect to planning and designing elements of Babcock we felt would promote multi-generational living. So that number one. Number two, you talked about maybe densification or verticality and whatnot. Firm believers in that. We believe wholeheartedly in those central core town areas like Founders Square that has 65,000 square feet of mixed use. I showed a 200,000 square foot. It was actually just a site that'll be 200,000 square feet of mixed use behind that extends that for about 2.5 blocks. That's going to have 5-story multifamily in it. It's going to be adjacent to a 225 unit townhome community, which is across the street from a 373 unit apartment complex. So 100% subscribe to having that density in the town and have the density fade a bit as you get further from town in the bullseye. We've got an area I showed the master plan kind of starting on the west side, moving to the middle zone, which we're in now. That's our Midtown. That's called Midtown. And Midtown will be where we have 5, 7, 8-story product, office, multifamily, condo, etc. So I do believe that walkability in town is a huge factor. And there's a lot of demand for in-town living. The challenge is figuring out how to do it affordably and do it at a price point or a rent that the masses can afford. But certainly from a planning perspective, we intend to have a lot of verticality and a lot of that product in and around those town centers.
That's um, a great response. I would love if it comes to pass to see the imageability of that. I don't know if there are, promotional materials that talk about what that physical reality will look like going forward. But I think I've said early on to everyone, this is a project in process. This is not a finished product, and I wouldn't want it to be seen today as a finished product. And in that regard, I'm going to invite people to do what I've been doing and check in every once in a while on what's up in Babcock Ranch, because I just find it interesting to see this evolution. I must say, I get your newsletter. I know what, festivals are happening. It's fascinating to me. And I think if in that material you include the propositions for some of this continued growth, I'm just suggesting to the audience, if you're interested in finding out where this goes, how it goes going forward after, just becoming aware of its existence, do that. I do that. There's a couple of questions which surfaced. The first one, which I must say at my tender age, I find fascinating. What are your plans for staged introduction of health care to support a population of 60,000?
Fantastic question, which transcends all the multi-generational demographics. So I should say this. Maybe it's a broader. I'll start with a broader answer to the question. I think one of the biggest lessons learned for us in this process is the power of partnership and not pretending you can be all things to all people. You've got to be realistic about what your skill sets are, what your strengths are, what your constraints are, and so. We really embraced that early on, the Florida Power and Light being an example of something we thought was really important and necessary, but not being in our wheelhouse from an expertise perspective. How do we partner with best in class to bring that into Babcock Ranch? Health and wellness. The largest healthcare provider in Southwest Florida is Lee Health Memorial. And so we partnered with them early on to bring primary care to Babcock Ranch. So they do have primary care at Babcock Ranch through Lee Health. We have a 27,000 square foot health and wellness center that Lee Health manages, and they do physical therapy, occupational therapy, and health and wellness there. It's not enough, but it's a start. We've got Tampa General Hospital from Tampa coming down. They're opening up a 6,500 square foot urgent care facility in our new shopping center called Shops Yellow Pine. They're also opening up another 6,000 square feet of primary care and lab at Babcock Ranch. We're pretty far down the road. I can't announce it with detail yet, but we're working on a micro hospital as well for Babcock Ranch. We need to have that at Babcock Ranch. So all those things that you need in your town, and you think about wherever you live, USA or anywhere else, we need to have all those things at Babcock. If we're going to be true to the mission of sustainability, we can't have our homeowners driving 30 minutes to get what they need. They've got to get what they need on property. So schooling, jobs, healthcare, wellness, all that's got to be at Babcock Ranch. And it's a laggard in a lot of ways. You got to have the rooftops first to get the population density to get some of those folks to pay attention to you. So there's a bit of a chicken and egg, analysis that we have to continually, an ongoing effort to kind of beat that chicken and egg dynamic. But absolutely 100% need it, want it. Young families need it. The elder side of the generation, the retirees, the folks in assisted living, everyone needs healthcare. So we've got to have a big presence on Babcock Ranch.
There's another I think a very interesting question. Someone asked, Amelia asked, if there were any projects that your team used as case studies for what you might do in planning and design of Babcock Ranch.
Oh my goodness. Absolutely. We spent a solid 6 weeks touring the country, and Lance, you mentioned this, Columbia, Reston, and then places like Irvine Ranch out in the West Coast, the Woodlands in Texas, you name it. We toured probably what we thought to be 30 of the most compelling places in the country. And what could we learn and take away from all of them, right? Little bits and pieces, and what were some of the things that maybe went right versus went wrong, and so we had a lot of learning, guys. We bought Babcock, like I said, in 2006. something that you may have heard about happened in 2008 called the Great Financial Crisis, which kind of sent everybody back on our heels. And we didn't break ground on Babcock until 2015. So we had a 9-year period of learning and recalibrating and, re-strategizing how to launch Babcock Ranch. So we really leaned on a lot of our peers in the industry, who had done other major large scale projects for lessons learned, and even a community called Serenbe that you may have heard of, which is spectacularly designed. We learned something from probably, I'd say, 30 different places that we tried to pull into Babcock Ranch. So absolutely, we like to be leaders, not followers, but we also like to learn from our peers. And if there's something that makes sense that we can incorporate into our vision, then by all means, let's do it.
So, on a different tack, what about the economic demographics of Babcock? What about accommodating people of different origins and different income groups? Something that's not a major issue in our country. There's always the question about anyone or everyone or every place doing its fair share. Are there ways of accommodating the more affluent and the younger or less affluent members of the Florida community as Babcock Ranch expands?
Yeah, I think there has to be. I think back to the whole, what does it mean to be a sustainable town? It needs to be a town for everybody, and we don't want people that have to commute, 30 minutes to Babcock to work because they can't afford to live at Babcock Ranch, right? We're failing as a developer if that's the outcome. So, look, it's tricky, right? Affordable housing is a tricky concept. Workforce housing is a tricky concept to work, given where costs have gone. But we're working. We have so largely at Babcock Ranch, we've got about 12,000 people living at Babcock today, which is a substantial town in of itself. It'll be 50 to 60 when we're done, 1,000 people. And by and large, Lance, from when we broke ground in 15, selling our first home in 18 to date, it's largely been a for sale housing option for the marketplace. So you had to buy a house. In 2024, it was the first year that there was rental product at Babcock Ranch. So we have 373 units of garden style rental, and we've got 246 single family rental homes. So a purpose built single family home for rent, 3, 4, and 5 bedroom homes. In the 3, 4, and 5 bedroom homes, we're doing those on our own balance sheet on our own behalf. And we've allocated 15% of those homes for what we've coined Preferred Employee Program, the PEP. If you're a school teacher, a policeman, or a fireman, there are 15% of our housing stock is set aside at a much heavily discounted rate for policemen, firemen, and teachers. It's not an AMI test, it's an employment test. If you're a teacher, fireman, or policeman, and you want to live at Babcock Ranch, you can rent in the flat, it's called the Flatwoods. You can rent in the Flatwoods for a heavily discounted rate because of where you're employed. And so we're doing those sorts of things. We're working with our builders for, as you said earlier, higher density product that can help drive some of those costs down. Working with the local municipalities, because some of these costs aren't just hard costs, but they're soft costs tied to impact fees and other things. How do we bring costs down? How do we take density up to result in a more economically viable month-to-month payment, rent, and or mortgage payment for the homeowner or the home renter?
Part of my life was spent doing some research way back in the day. I did this at Princeton University, but it was also being done at Rutgers University. The Rutgers research resulted in a book that pretty much paralleled what we did, that was called Princeton, the Affluent Community. And it was a discussion actually about the fact that a place like Princeton, which we all know is extremely attractive and wonderful community. I think you probably know it well. You're in New Jersey.
Yeah, absolutely.
Appreciated living there. But what the discussion was, that George Sternly was, that in fact policemen, firemen, and school teachers couldn't live in Princeton. They were the ones who were living 40 minutes away.
Yeah.
And they didn't pay it in rent. They paid it in car ownership, transportation, fuel costs, childcare, and everything else.
Yep.
So it's encouraging to hear that aspect being considered as part of your objectives.
Thank you.
I'm looking at a note from one of my colleagues. Tom, great presentation. Wondering if you and your colleagues would be able to meet with the winners of the AIA Delano Aldrich Emerson Traveling Fellowship two people. They will be in Southwest Florida this fall doing research on resilience. I would imagine that they would be more than welcome. Sid is always,
Absolutely.
I would be.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
I'll put you in touch with Rick Bell.
Okay. Great.
And you can negotiate that. I always find one of the most rewarding aspects of doing any of this is when I know there's a direct follow-up and connection beyond the presentation. So I guarantees that it has some legs. And
That's great.
I somehow thought that this would, and I hope that people, as I said, will continue to keep an eye out. This is a total outlier, as I said, coming in. We haven't done new communities. New communities are fraught with all sorts of other issues that we don't deal with in our larger, urbanized areas. But we have, I don't know if you scanned our previous programs, we've looked at informal communities in Nairobi. We have looked at other, communities in the favelas of Rio de Janeiro. So we've looked at other special places that represent, quite honestly, billions of people living in other circumstances. And this is a conversation that I thought from the get-go with listening to Kid represented an attempt to actually figure out between what exists and what is desirable, what you actually do. And part of what I'm thinking is that this is what you represent. It's part of what, when I look at, the ability to transfer water from one lake to another to get in prepared for, a storm condition, or the investigation of the new materials, it's a laboratory. And I think it should be, and not every new community is a laboratory. Some of them are, they're laboratories, but they're there. They're privately owned and meant to, turn a profit and not obligated to be experimental. And what I liked about Sid's presentation from the get-go was this extremely forward-looking attitude towards what something may be. And I think I thank you for discussing how you guys look at that and the strides you make. And I look forward to checking back. I'd like to see how it densifies and how successful you are with that. So all I can do is say, send my regards to Sid and the team.
I will.
Thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule. I know you guys are busy, and I appreciate the generosity and the sharing.
Oh, thank you for having me, Lance. It's an honor, and it's we're passionate about what we do. We have a lot of fun with it, so we love telling the story. If anybody has any follow-up questions, then feel free to reach out to me directly. I should be on the email. And they've got my contact information, I'm sure, at CSU. So this was great. I appreciate the conversation, Lance. Thank you for all you guys do. It's inspirational for us as developers to see a group like yours focused on the same things. For the forward look, where we're going, not where we've been. And the more we can collaborate with that type of thinking, I think the better off we're going to be as a group.
Okay, and a shout out to Michelle and Julian and the others and Mariana for helping make sure we put this together and it worked so nicely.
Yeah, great job, guys. This was great.
Okay, so from up here in the Northeast where it's winter.
Yeah. Hey, come on down. We got a lot of homes to sell, Babcock. Come on down and buy a few houses from us. It'd be great.
Okay. Thank you, Tom.
Okay, thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.